and allowing them to put any kind of amendments they wanted in. And somebody dropped in a hate crimes bill, the type of thing that you've just been talking about, and that passed the House of Representatives. In fact, I understand that several very highly ranked members of the House who weren't even there at that particular moment didn't know that had happened even after it had taken place. And now that's going to the Senate. And I think that if our people don't want that to happen, if anybody doesn't want that to happen, they should be writing their senators in their own states saying not to pass this hate crimes bill because it has been the source of every kind of injustice imaginable in other countries and in some states, and would be a disaster for the United States. And I would urge all of you listening to consider that very carefully.
You know, Dr. Kennedy, I could not agree with you more. This is the most dangerous bill in America. What hate crimes really is unequal justice under the law. It says that you're going to get a stiffer penalty if you target a homosexual activist rather than targeting a grandmother or a defenseless child. It's like giving a discount coupon out just for going after grandma rather than a homosexual activist. But here's what the coupon says. Attention, violent criminals, target the right victim and get a discounted jail sentence. That's right, under a special discount offered by the U.S. House of Representatives, violent criminals who target grandma because she's old and vulnerable may serve less time than those who target a grown man who engages in homosexual behavior. Forget fair and equal justice. That's a thing of the past. We've got to intervene to make sure that equal justice is not a thing of the past, but it goes beyond that. It's all about silencing Christians who might speak out against this radical agenda.
This is certainly a violation of everything that we've ever known about American justice. Not only that, it's also doing something that Jefferson condemned, and that is not dealing with the acts, but dealing with the intents of the heart and criminalizing people for what they supposedly think.
That's right. And it's got to stop. And it's, as you've said, very close to passage in the Senate, and we've got to intervene now. In fact, I've got a phone number. If people want to call the U.S. Senate, the number is 202-224-3121, and voice that opinion. Hate crimes, if hate crimes lives, our freedom of speech dies.
That's well put, Janet, and I hope that many, many listeners will do that. Because as we've said, it has passed the House of Representatives, and now it's going to the Senate. I really believe the most important, significant bill that has ever come before Congress as far as its potential to destroy the basic freedoms that our founders gave us. So, dear friend, it's now before the Senate, and I urge you to call or write your senators and tell them not to pass this hate speech or hate crimes bill.
You know, you mentioned that it could affect what we're allowed to teach our children. Well, we've got a judge in Colorado that already ruled that a mother can't teach her daughter anything that the judge considers to be, quote unquote, homophobic. So that rules out Leviticus, apparently, the first chapter of Romans, even her story of being an ex-lesbian. She apparently is not allowed to tell it to her daughter because this judge has forbidden it. They're reaching into our lives. They're reaching into our schools. They're reaching into our churches. And that's the danger. And that's why we've got to speak up while we still can.
I could not agree with you more on that. Speaking of the influence that this has on children, tell us about what is going on in this regard in some of our schools in California and even other states as well.
Well, it's gone beyond Heather's Two Mommies in the school curriculum. We're now looking at, let me read you this little segment. This is a little ditty called In Mommy's High Heels. It's about a cross-dressing boy who wears a colorful skirt. And here's what it says. Let them say I'm like a girl. What's wrong with being like a girl? Let them jump and jeer and whirl. They are the swine. I am the pearl. Let them laugh, let them scream. They'll all be beheaded when I'm queen. Now, if we had said something like that, it'd be a hate crime. But they're reading this to kids in school, and in California, as you mentioned, if little Johnny scratches his head and says, that doesn't seem right, a boy wearing a colorful skirt or two kings living happily ever after, do you know that little Johnny is selected out to go into a re-education class, what the legislature refers to as appropriate counseling? They're going to put this guy through the homosexual agenda without mom and dad ever knowing. They're going to make sure that he is marching in lockstep with that agenda, In fact, we're seeing a guy by the name of David Parker. A lot of people say, why does marriage matter? Why does this battle matter? Because it's reaching into our schools. When the Superior Court in Massachusetts declared marriage between two men or two women, they're teaching it in the schools to such a level that a guy by the name of David Parker has his little son come home with what they call a diversity book bag. And their assignment was not only to read these biased stories about the homosexual agenda, their assignment was to celebrate homosexuality. And so he went to the school and said, this doesn't seem right. I'd just like my child to be exempted from this, if you don't mind. And what happens is they have this meeting. They give him the impression they're going to allow him to exempt his child from this agenda. But what they're doing instead is lining up police cars. So they say at the middle of the meeting, this meeting is over. You're now in violation of trespass. They slap him with handcuffs, carry him off to jail. He spends the night in jail, essentially, for questioning the homosexual curriculum in his son's kindergarten class.
Oh, that's just almost unbelievable, isn't it?
It's happening in America, and that's why these issues matter. Because once again, if they can silence the truth, they will silence the gospel. I'm reminded, Dr. Kennedy, of a conversation I had while working here with you, that a woman from InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, great organization, about 7 years ago, I sat down and talked with her. I said, are you all dealing with the issues on campus, the homosexuality, abortion, pornography, evolution? She said, no, we just want to focus on the gospel. And I told her, I said, I don't think there's anything more important than that. I think it's the most important thing we can do. But I'm going to make a prediction that if you don't address the issues that God has something to say about that are affecting our culture, you're going to lose your right to spread the gospel. And it was later that same year that Tufts University kicked InterVarsity Christian Fellowship off of campus. Why? Because they refused to let homosexual activists be on their board of directors. Last time I checked, they didn't make the pro-abortion groups. They weren't required to have pro-lifers on their board of directors. It's this issue, this one issue, that's kicking sororities, fraternities, Christian clubs off of campuses because they say it's discriminatory to actually believe what God's Word says.
People may think this just couldn't possibly happen in America, but consider this. How many children have been taken by school counselors, taken physically to an abortion clinic, and have had an abortion without their parents ever being told anything about it? The same way now, children are being taken and without their parents' knowledge at all, put into some kind of counseling or therapy classes and given the whole homosexual indoctrination procedure that they do as they straighten out their minds, so to speak, to understand that homosexuality is a good and vital and equally valid form of lifestyle as is marriage. And this is going to be a disaster to this country if this bill passes Congress. And it's passed the House. It's now before the Senate. So, dear friend, call your senators and tell them not to vote for a hate crimes bill or a hate speech bill, because this would be a disaster to our country.
We would never, in a million years, expect that we would hand out a book in schools called Heather Has 2 Cigarettes. Why? Because smoking is dangerous. That's why we don't have smoking sections in the school cafeteria. But homosexual behavior is actually 3 times more dangerous than smoking. It could cut an average of 20 years off your life. This is the reason why we don't want it in our communities. The beauty of God's Word is when you follow it, we benefit. When you choose to obey Him, we get blessings. When we violate His commandments, then, the reason He has those commandments are there to protect us. And so what's happening is the kids are actually coming into harm's way physically, emotionally. And what some groups are doing is saying that if you're doing that, as one of my Faith to Action partners sent to every school board member, every school board superintendent, said if you violate the state law that says if you give information that's harmful to minors, that causes them harm, you are legally accountable. Dr. Kennedy, you've been in this battle a long time, and I know that you feel as I do. We're sick of talking, tired of losing battles we can win. We're reacting, responding, defending a shrinking piece of real estate. I think we need to take back ground, to be proactive, to go on the offense again. One of the things I learned from Ronald Reagan that I wrote about in the book is that he didn't set out to survive the Cold War. He set out to win it. And that's what we must do in the cultural war. You don't hear too much about winning the cultural war for life, liberty, and the family. But I believe if we work together, if we are proactive, if we control the debate and focus on where the battle's the hottest, each of us, instead of focusing on our uniforms and what groups we belong to, what mailing list you may be on, no, we need to focus on where we can win, to take back ground, to ultimately occupy until he comes.
Janet, you have a chapter in your book about lessons from God. Tell us about that.
It's easy for us, Dr. Kennedy, to look at all the giants that occupy the land. What I recommend in my book is we look up and see the God that towers above every one of those giants. If you're looking at a strategic map about how to win the cultural war, we've got to realize there is a spiritual battle going on. That's why we have the armor to wear. It's a battle. And if you look at it strategically, think about it, God trumps Satan. And when Satan left heaven, there